What is going on, trainers? DrumVillain here, and before we start, I wanted to share with you guys that I got blessed with a perfect Ho-Oh from a lucky trade over the weekend. Shout out to Princess Penny for this perfect Ho-Oh. I've done more Ho-Oh raids, I swear, than any other legendary in the game so far. I really wanted this thing, and it ended up coming from a lucky trade rather than a raid, but I'm not going to complain. I've got it, I've maxed it out, and we'll probably be testing out in the Master League. I've been looking for an excuse to give the Master League another go, and what better excuse than a new perfect legendary Pokemon. It makes it my 14th perfect legendary / mythical Pokemon, although a couple of those have been lucky trades because along with the 12 legendaries I've also had a perfect Meloetta from the GoFest 2021 research and a perfect speed form Deoxys as well. But anyway, on with the video. So today we're going to be talking about the Ultra League, and specifically I wanted to talk about Kommo-O because I did utilize it in the team in my last video, but the main focus of that last video was Gholdengo, sorry, instead in the Ultra League, and Kommo-O didn't really get spoken about all that much alongside. I was trying to focus on just what Gholdengo can do. And I do think it's got a lot of play in the current Ultra League if you have access to it, because obviously Jangmo is very rare still in Pokemon Go. It's hard to gather candies for, it's hard to find one with any reasonable kind of IV spread. I was pretty lucky with my first Jangmo that I actually found in the wild being a decent IV spread for Great League. I think it was like rank 120 or something like that, which is pretty solid. And I have here a rank 57 for the Ultra League, which I thought I might as well build it because it's going to be a long time, probably until we get access to more Jangmos and I can get a stronger PvP IV spread. And I thought it's a nice, interesting Pokemon to talk about, utilize, and I was honestly building it for factions as well because I'm currently taking part in factions on Sylph to get some more practice at the Pick 6, Choose 3 format for tournaments, regional, stuff like that. So Kommo-O has a pretty unique role in being a dragon fighting type Pokemon, which means it can resist the elementals like your Swamperts and your grass types like your Venusaurs and stuff like that, but also it can take down steel types like Registeel, Galarian Stunfisk. So it's got quite a unique role to play, but it is very vulnerable to fairy typing because it has access to Dragon Claw and Close Combat as its charge moves, what you really want to run on this thing, and that means you're going to get walled by fairy typing. So as long as you can keep it away from Tapu Fini, Togekiss, Sylveon, Gramble, other picks you're going to see in the Ultra League like that, you're going to be looking pretty solid because it's got play against almost everything else. We're going to be pairing this thing with a Alolan Muck to act as a pretty hard counter to fairy types that might swap in. If somebody decides to swap in a Tapu Fini, Alolan Muck's going to be able to shut that down very effectively with the Poison Jab fast move. Sludge Wave as a charge move. We're not interested in baiting and potentially not getting shields out of people who want to hit for big damage, so running Dark Pulse and Sludge Wave on Alolan Muck, and then to add some much needed bulk to the team because Kommo-O isn't super squishy, but it's not that bulky either, and I think bulk is a very strong thing to have on your side in the Ultra League in general. We're going to be bringing Cresselia because I still think it's one of the strongest picks in Ultra League overall. It's got massive versatility. You can run Future Sight and you can win against Charizard, which people often forget, and win against Talonflame with that. You can run Grass Knot, take out the waters like Swampert. You can have good play against Jellicent with that. You can run Moonblast to take out the ghosts and the dark types as well. So I do think Cresselia is still not, I wouldn't say underrated in Ultra League because people know it's very strong, but people sleep on it for modern teams in the current state of Ultra League, and it's still very strong. And as you can see here, this opponent swaps in a Gramble, we can bring in the Muck, and just look at how fast we can shred this thing down, all the way down, have Dark Pulses ready to dump into the Giratina that's going to come back in and going to leave us in a very strong position to win out this game. The opponent is going to end up surrendering here, and it's a GG. So guys, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, help me in the fight against the YouTube algorithm, and let's talk about strategy. Okay, this first matchup, we've got a Scrafty on the lead, which we're not feeling too stressed about any which way you want to slice it, because all Pokemon on our team have played against Scrafty. The Moonblast on Cresselia is going to be double super effective. Kommo-O's got the access to the close combat for big damage, and Muck can hit for neutral with Poison Jab. So we're pretty neutral across the board in terms of setup, but they swap in a Drifblim, which we're very happy to lock in our Muck against. And honestly, I'm a little excited for Shadow Drifloon to become available pretty soon. That's going to be pretty exciting for the Ultra League in general. You get an XL Shadow Drifloon. Those Icy Winds are going to add up a lot more against the targets that are going to be resisting the Ghost type damage. Only were we able to build up excess energy on Kommo-O before swapping out into Muck, but we're also able to control switch advantage without giving up any shields in this situation. We're going to get farmed down by the Scrafty, but it's not going to get that much of an energy lead. We're going to finish building up to the close combat and throw a Dragon Claw, expecting a shield from the opponent. They don't shield, which is a fantastic call by the opponent because that could absolutely have been the close combat and would have annihilated Scrafty for sure. Now, you're going to notice that Cresselia right here is running Future Sight, and that is because when I first put this team together, I had Future Sight instead of Moonblast on Cresselia from Factions, and I was giving it a bit of a stab to see how it worked out, and it does work pretty well with Future Sight. You can definitely get away with running it on Cresselia for sure, and in this situation it happens to work out really in our favour because the opponent has a Crobat in the back which is going to get obliterated by a Future Sight, and also means that we can keep Cresselia away from Scrafty because without Moonblast that match is much worse for us. We actually get farmed down before we get to throw our last Future Sight because we let the move go through, which is a little bit questionable. But Scrafty comes back in. We're going to actually just throw the close combat because shields are down, and we know we've got one shield left to survive a charge move, get to a Dragon Claw, and take them out. So despite misjudging the damage that Cresselia could take there, whether we could get to that Future Sight, doesn't matter. We're going to take the win. In terms of what moveset would I recommend on Cresselia overall, honestly, it's completely up to you. There's some matches in this video I only win because it's got Future Sight. Some matches I only win because it's got Moonblast. I end up trending towards Moonblast more than Future Sight overall, but seriously, either is going to work absolutely fine for you. Now, against Charizard leads, I tend to stick Kommo-O in. I tend to stay in and play it out because if you're running Moonblast on Cresselia, you definitely want to keep it away from Charizard, and oftentimes Charizard leads don't have that much play against Cresselia in the back. Sometimes they have Trevenant, sometimes they don't, but in either case, I tend to play out this matchup, and we are able to take switch advantage, but it does cost us a shield. There is a Trevenant in the back on this team, which we can line Muck up against, and then there's an Obstagoon in the back. And this, again, we've still got Future Sight on our Cresselia here, so this is not as good as a situation as we want it to be. We are just going to have to keep throwing Grass Knots at this thing rather than the Moonblast, rather than the Future Sight, sorry, because that's going to be double resisted, and the opponent's going to let it go through because Obstagoon can survive one Moonblast, one Grass Knot, can survive one of anything from Cresselia, really. And this is a pretty bad situation for us overall, but we're going to play it out. We're going to keep throwing these Grass Knots. We get a shield out of them, which is very, very nice. They might suspect that we still have Moonblast rather than Future Sight because we are building up the energy for the Moonblast before throwing. So we're very, very lucky here. We get both shields out of this Obstagoon because they know they need the Obstagoon to deal with our alot and Muck. I'm just going to keep, we're not going to shield Cresselia at all because Cresselia has no play. There's a Trevenant and it's an Obstagoon and we've not got Moonblast. There's no point keeping Cresselia alive. I'm going to bring in Muck, save the shield. For that, we can throw a Dark Pulse at the Trevenant that's going to swap in. We're going to get them very, very low. We can farm them down entirely, and then we should be able to get to a Sludge Wave against the Obstagoon. Absolutely no worries, and it is going to give us the win. Just be aware, while Charizard lead isn't the most stressful thing for Kommo-O in the back, there is a decent chance of a Trevenant in the back to hard answer things like Swamperts and Tapu Finis. So, be aware, consider controlling switch advantage if you see Charizard on lead. Now, Deoxys lead, I find one of the more stressful leads to deal with when running this team overall because your best two answers are in the back. I tend to try and catch a Psycho Boost onto a Lower Muck. I think a Lower Muck is the better safe swap against a Deoxys lead because Cresselia does completely fine against Deoxys, whether it's got Grass Knot, Future Sight, Moonblast, whatever. Cresselia is going to do pretty well in that matchup. You're resisting the Psycho Boost, resisting the counters, and the Rock Slides and Thunderbolts just aren't doing that much to take you out. So we do successfully catch a Psycho Boost, which is very, very nice for us, and we pull out a Greedent in the back, which isn't the best answer to a Lower Muck, and we are going to be able to control switch advantage, at least in the even shield scenarios here. We do just take them out. Well, no, we don't take them out, but we're going to just survive this charge move. It's not going to quite take us out. We're going to farm them down with like 1 HP and a Dream. The Deoxys is going to come back in and farm us down, but it doesn't get that much of an energy lead at all. And we can lock Cresselia in against that thing. They swap out to Scrafty, and we've got Kommo-O in the back to answer this thing. Don't need to shield the first move because it is obviously just a power-up punch. Not going to be very threatening to us at all. It really is just that adding up counter damage over time that's stressful for us. We're going to start throwing charge moves into this Scrafty, and they call. Again, Scrafty's calling that we're not going to throw close combat on Kommo-O is really common. And the only reason we're not too stressed about this situation is because we can really spam these Dragon Claws at this point. We had a big energy advantage from the lead, and we know that now that this Scrafty is down in Grass Knot range anyway, we're not too particularly stressed out about the rest of this game because we're just going to go for, well, because we get to this Grass Knot before they get to a foul play here, we're going to throw it, get a shield out of them, which we do, and now we're going to shield up whatever they throw and Psycho cut them down. They've got a bit of health here, they've got a bit of bulk, but we are going to be able to make this farm down and have a ton of energy to dump into the Deoxys, and it is going to give us the win overall, this matchup drags out now because it's a spammy, weak charge moves, but this is in Cresselia's favour and it is going to go our way. I'm going to speed this up because it is pretty long matchup, but the opponent does realise and surrenders. That's going to be a good game, and this next matchup is an important lesson on reading an opponent's team. So, Swampert on the lead. This is good for Kommo-O because the Dragon type is going to be resisting the Hydro Cannon damage, and this opponent's going to swap out into an Alolan Ninetales, a Charm Alolan Ninetales, and we're going to bring in Cresselia instead of Alolan Muck. And the main reason we're thinking this is because they've got a Swampert on the lead. Most Swampert leads have a hard answer to Cresselia in the back, whether it's a Steel type or whether it's a Trevenant. And the main thing we're thinking here is that regardless of that, Muck has a better matchup against a Steel type and a better matchup against Trevenant than Cresselia does. Cresselia can still control this matchup pretty handedly, regardless of moveset and stuff like that. They have to commit 2 shields to even have a chance at swinging that matchup back. And there's the Trevenant that comes in to get an energy lead on us here. And if we'd have swapped in Muck into the Ninetales, would have been in a bit of a scarier situation because although Kommo-O can do decent work against Trevenant, it's not as dominant of a matchup as Alolan Muck is, and you can see that the Trevenant got a pretty handy energy lead off of us as well from farming down the Cresselia. The Swampert comes in, we've got Kommo-O to bring in on this thing, and again, we want to keep Muck away from Swampert because it's a very good matchup for Swampert that, and we're going to end up shielding up a Hydro Cannon, which is fine because they're committing a shield at this point. We can get this through, we're going to take them out, and Muck is going to very handedly finish this game off for us. And you might not think about it at first glance, but it really is worth being aware. When you see that first Pokemon on the lead, think immediately about what they might have in the back, because if they do, they're not going to have something else in the back that's weak to Cresselia, because otherwise Cresselia lead's impossible for them to deal with. They're probably going to have a hard answer to it because it's notoriously Cresselia is like classed as one of the strongest counters to Swampert in the Ultra League that's not Trevenant. So there's a good chance Cresselia can't handle whatever's in the back. So there's a good chance that the Alolan Ninetales matchup is the best matchup for it, that's not Swampert itself. So we swap it in, and like I said, it paid off a lot for us in this matchup. So that's a GG, and in this next matchup, there's an opportunity to read the opponent's team that I miss, and it cost me heavily. So Giratina on the lead. This is a neutral matchup between Kommo-O and Giratina. No matter what fast move Giratina's running, it's a neutral matchup because Giratina's got so much bulk. They swap out into Cresselia. We're going to meet it with Alolan Muck because Alolan Muck is a very good counter to Cresselia in general. They have to land, I think, 2 Moonblasts and a Grass Knot to knock you out. So you can very handedly control switch advantage in this situation. Even though they get the attack debuff on the first Moonblast, doesn't matter. We're still going to knock them out with the second Dark Pulse, and we're still got that advantage to be able to control switch advantage at the expense of even shield scenarios. So the opposing Cresselia is going to shield up, right? And we're going to shield up as well because we're going to get to another Dark Pulse. We're going to go for the even shield scenarios, which we're going to get to, and that's fine. But now they're going to throw another charge move. They're going to shield this up and throw another move. And we think, you know what? Let's just get a massive energy lead on Kommo-O. But why would they swap out of a neutral lead immediately? Why would they swap out if they didn't have a really hard counter in the back? Which they do. There's a Shadow Gramble, and that's a double super effective charm that's coming through there. Now we end up with Cresselia lined up against Giratina, which doesn't have Moonblast still. Like Cresselia here still has Future Sight and not Moonblast. This matchup is significantly worse for Cresselia, so we should have been extra vigilant to control switch advantage and at least line up Kommo-O with this thing again. Or we should have stayed in... no, we shouldn't have stayed in with Kommo-O against Cresselia because if they had Moonblast, it would hit us like an absolute truck on Kommo-O. But we should have either swapped in Cresselia or we should have definitely controlled switch advantage using Muck, because then we'd have had our Cresselia against their Gramble, which, just because of our bulk, goes in our favour. And look at this. Look how much damage those Shadow Charms were doing. Absolutely devastating. This close combat, even though it's Shadow and that's just single resisted, it's not going to be enough. We're able to knock out this Gramble with a Grass Knot, but the Giratina is going to farm us down, and we're going to take an L in this for a 4 out of 5 set, just because we didn't shield up that Grass Knot and push for switch advantage against that Cresselia, because otherwise that game would almost certainly have been in our favour. It's not a huge stretch because 4 wins out of 5 is still very, very nice to take with the team overall, but it's a shame that it could have been a 5 that we just missed out on for what is kind of a misjudgment when you really think about it based on what we saw at the beginning of that game. Alright, next matchup we got a Swampert on the lead, and they're going to choose to stay in, so we're going to play this matchup out. We are trying to be efficient to minimize any extra energy they get when we throw our charge moves. So that's why we threw 5 instead of just throwing the Dragon Claw immediately as soon as we got it. And this Swampert's going to build up to Earthquake before they've got a ton of energy actually. And we're going to shield up. Here's the Earthquake. Now we're just going to go for the Dragon Claw before they get to another potential Earthquake, because they are pretty close, because they did build up a ton of energy before throwing the first one, and they shield up. And this could be an Earthquake. So we're going to read that they actually don't want to see Kommo-O in the back, shield up the next Earthquake, farm them down, and now we got 3 very healthy Pokemon, but we are on 0 shields. A Cobalion comes in, we try to bait it with a Dragon Claw instead of a close combat, and they catch on Giratina, which means it's a nice neutral, well no, sorry, super effective charge move rather than the double resisted close combat. And now they're locked in with Giratina, Shadow Claw Giratina, so we can bring in Alolan Muck, which really struggles against Cobalion, just because it's resisting the poison. It's double resisting the poison jabs and Sludge Wave, it's single resisted the Dark Pulse. They're hitting you for neutral with the double kicks and the Sacred Swords, so it's just a bad matchup for Muck in general. So we take out the Giratina, that's completely fine. This Cobalion has got to throw to take us out, otherwise we're going to start chipping them down pretty handedly. And between Kommo-O and Cresselia, we've definitely got this matchup in the bag, because Cresselia is a very good answer to Cobalion in general. Whether you got Moonblast or Future Sight, it's very much in Cresselia's favour. I think we're going to end up bringing in... No, yeah, bringing in Cresselia, because they did farm up a bit of energy there, and it doesn't matter if they dump it all in. We want to preserve that little bit of energy on Kommo-O. Not that it matters, they can't take out Cresselia, but just on the off chance, we didn't want to just send in Kommo-O or get it immediately knocked out with a couple of charge moves and then waste that bit of energy that we did still have. Throw the Moonblast, because we have now swapped Cresselia back to Moonblast for this set, and you're going to see how that performs. The opponent's going to realise and surrender, and that's going to be a GG. Alright, next up on lead, we've got Shadow Nidoqueen, which isn't as common in the Ultra League by any measure, but it's still pretty strong. And the way we're going to play this is they throw straight away when they get to the Poison Fang. So we know it's a Poison Fang and not an Earth Power, so we let it go through. We're going to throw a Dragon Claw to get them pretty low if they let it go through, and then we're going to swap out. This could be a silly decision, because honestly, Alolan Muck really struggles with Nidoqueen, but we figure it's already pretty low at this point. We could probably Poison Jab them down if we really needed to, if we end up somehow locked against it. But we take a Poison Fang, still not a big stress. It drops his defense, and they bring in Obstagoon. And this isn't a bad situation for us. Even though our defense is dropped, we can take shield advantage in this situation. They do shield up the first Moonblast, which is completely fine. We're going to throw another Moonblast. They are throwing Obstruct rather than Night Slash, which works out, because what they can do here is they're going to throw a second Obstruct, and then they're going to throw a Night Slash. No, they throw one. Okay, yeah. I think they might have thought that with the pre-defense debuff from Nidoqueen, that might have done a bit more damage and taken us out. They're going to throw again. We're going to shield it because we're at the Moonblast to hit them to a bit more neutral damage, because this Obstagoon with its buff defense could put a serious amount of work in if we gave it a bit more room to work with. They're going to farm us down, that's fine. We bring in Kommo-O, they swap out aggressively into Scrafty. We're going to go straight for the close combat. We've had too many Scrafties, not shield up. Dragon Claws, of course this one shields, because these trainers are psychic sometimes and they just know when you're trying to bait. We can bring in Alolan Muck, and the poison jabs are going to really add up. We can go straight for the Sludge Wave because they've got no shield. We don't need to shield up because Foul Play is resisted. Power Up Punch is going to be doing nothing to us. That's completely fine. We get a little bit of extra energy because we know we've got room to. And then we're going to throw, take them out. And honestly, we've still got a shield. So we're in a very strong position here. We shield up this move because the Nidoqueen is energy dry. And we know that we can farm this thing down, get to a Dark Pulse against the Nidoqueen. And that is going to be our game. GG. So I'm battling at night time now at this point, and we've got another Charizard on the lead. So we're going to do what we've done before. We're going to stay in, and because it's a regular Charizard and not a Shadow, you can survive one Dragon Claw pretty comfortably. Although then if they commit like 2 shields, they can farm you down with wing attacks, which is a little bit of a scary position for any team to be in. So when I throw a Dragon Claw, they're going to shield up as well. That's completely fine. And now we're going to let this go through, and we're going to throw a Dragon Claw back ourselves, which I believe they let through, if I remember this rightly, which is completely fine. And then they swap out into Cresselia, and we're thinking once again there's probably a Trevenant in the back on this team, because why wouldn't there be a Trevenant to cover that Charizard very hardly against Tapu Fini and Swampert? So we're bringing our own Cresselia rather than Alolan Muck, and we're just going to mirror match this out because the Charizard's so low and it's pretty energy dry. So we know that we can just poison jab it down with Muck at this point, no matter what, even if we just soft lose this matchup because we're slightly behind on energy and the opposing Cresselia gets a Moonblast debuff on us and we're not getting one back, which is a little bit rough for us, but also it puts the matchup in their favour where they can definitely take control of it, but it's not devastating to the point where their Cresselia is going to be out of control and hard to handle or anything like that. So keep throwing Moonblast, that's completely fine. We're going to survive one more from them if it is another Moonblast that they throw here, and we're just going to go for double Grass Knot because that means if they misjudge energy, we might be able to get to 2 and take them out. They might farm us down here. They do, it's a little bit scary because they could Moonblast our Muck, but we are just going to make it to that second Grass Knot because they want the farm down, they get a bit greedy. We're going to knock them out. What's in the back? It's the Trevenant. We got Muck to line up against it here, and the only thing we have to do is make sure that they don't catch a Dark Pulse. They catch a Dark Pulse on Charizard, it's going to put us in a much scarier position. We shield up the Shadow Ball because honestly, Shadow Ball's the hardest hitting charge move left in the game. We figure they're not going to bait at first with C-Bomb or anything like that because we can obviously survive one. So we shield up the first one, we get the shield off of them, and now we're just gunning for this Dark Pulse. And what we actually do is we hesitate on throwing for 1 second so that they start the next Shadow Claw animation and we can definitely throw the Dark Pulse in between so they can't catch. We get it through, we knock them out, and that's going to be a good game. In terms of say swap for this team, you can really use either Cresselia or Muck, it depends on the lead that you see. But in this matchup, we get Tapu Fini on the lead, which is terrible for Kommo-O, and we're going to say swap Muck, not Cresselia. And you might think, well, Muck's the harder counter because it's poison type, it shreds with the fast move and stuff. But the thing about Tapu Fini leads is that it means that there's probably not a Swampert in the back. They're not going to run Water on lead and Water in back, and Swampert's a very common Alot and Muck answer, which means it's less likely they're going to have a hard counter to Muck in the back. And also, Cresselia deals just fine with the Grass Knots. Like, it's not a bad situation to be in. And you can see that how it pays off because the opponent stayed in for so long with Tapu Fini, and we actually threw a Sludge Wave, and they must have been expecting a Acid Spray, and they get knocked out, and we take out the Tapu Fini really handedly, puts us in a very strong position. We've now got Kommo-O lined up with this Obstagoon. They've got a ton of energy, so we shield up. It's a Hyper Beam, so very, very good shield. The opponent comes in with a Shadow Dragonite. We can force a shield with the Dragon Claw, swap to Cresselia, go for the Moonblast, and it's just going to be our game. It's going to be a GG. And if we'd have say swapped Cresselia, then they'd have been able to punish it with Obstagoon, probably control switch advantage, and then get Tapu Fini lined up against Kommo-O, and we'd have lost just for the amount of lead that Tapu Fini would have then had to put some extra work in on the Muck for the Dragonite to finish off. Right, last matchup. Cresselia lead is awful for Kommo-O, but you get to the Dragon Claw before they get to either Moonblast or Future Sight, so we can throw a Dragon Claw, soften them up, and say swap our own Cresselia, which means that if they decide to stay in with the mirror match because they don't have a better answer for Cresselia, you can definitely control switch advantage. Unfortunately for us, this opponent has a Trevenant in the back, which is a very hard punish for us, and this means they're going to definitely be able to control switch advantage because they're going to be able to just annihilate with the Shadow Ball here. If they shield up this Moonblast, they're going to have switch advantage. Now, there is an argument to be made for, say, swapping Muck against Cresselia. It really does depend on what you feel like they might have in the back, to be honest, and it turns out that in this matchup, if we'd have, say, swapped Muck, we might have been able to win this game because what they had in the back is both a Trevenant and a Charizard. And Charizard is strong, but also it takes a lot of damage from those poison jabs. If we commit shields, there's a good chance we can farm them down, stuff like that. And then we'd have had Kommo-O lined up against the other one. We probably still would have lost this game, in all honesty, but it would have been much stronger position to not get our Cresselia locked in against a Trevenant, which gives it a massive advantage to take a huge lead in the game. And you can see there the Charizard is going to take us out. It's going to be able to put serious work in on the Muck now because it's got an energy lead as well. And there's not much we can do. We shield up a Blast Burn, which is better than shielding up a Dragon Claw, but it's going to get to another one. We have to gamble that they're not going to get there, and they survive with a smidgen of HP, get this Blast Burn off, and the damage is going to be done. It's going to absolutely obliterate us, and the Cresselia can just farm us down here, I believe. Even though we've got almost 2 Dark Pulses, we almost bring it back. It's not quite enough. We get taken out, and it's a GG. So that's another 4-1 set, so this team can definitely hold its own against Meta Lines in the Ultra League, and Kommo-O definitely plays its role very, very well. And we didn't really see Registeels in these battles, but I assure you, you can let one charge move through before you debuff yourself with Close Combat, and then you can just go Close Combat spam, and if they shield up, you shield up after that point, and it's a very dominant matchup for Kommo-O in general. So let me know what you guys think of the team and Kommo-O in general down below. Let me know how you're getting on with the Ultra League. Are you playing Mountain Cup this week instead? I'm going to try and get a video up for that pretty soon with a pretty strong team. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, hit the subscribe button, become an absolute legend today, and I will catch you guys next time.